Yeah. Good evening, my beautiful people. I go by the name Sotadeology. In today's particular live session, which is titled Sotadeology Lecture 30, Riemann hypothesis as solved by formula of everything. And this is the part 2. Now, with no further ado, we're going to actually, dive deeply into some mystery about exponential as related to logarithm, and then explain how formula of everything is able to solve Riemann hypothesis. But now, the first thing I want us to look at is Albert Einstein discovered the reason we could not have global now. The reason we could not have a global now, and that is simply because of, the feasibility of relativity of simultaneity. So now, relativity usually creates a central point, its own central point, and we have, the two parties attracting towards the central point at the same speed and even repelling away from the central point. And as a result of that, it is not feasible to actually get object at its point of instantiation. So that is why we could not have a global now. So we often have a genuine connection or a genuine contact at one side while having a suspension at the other side. That is the kind of phenomenon that we have. By applying formula of everything, we're able to actually get a full picture of this reality and then get um, how it has prevented the whole system of the universe from actually having this global now. Now, the problem of global now is being solved by instant transmission of information. And that is why we could have this quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement, as weird as it might sound, it is a genuine solution to having this global now. Now, before anything could be transmitted instantly, and for the fact that we even say that something is being transmitted at all, it means that that thing must travel from one localized point to another. And then the virtue of saying that it is instantly transmitted is just to say is to say, basically, if we're to say it is instant, then we can then say it is non-local. It is non-local in the sense that we will not be able to actually, capture the event because it violates the principles of cause and effect. It violates the principle of cause and effect. But then, if we dissect it thoroughly, we get the fact that for something to be transmitted at all, it must move from one localized point, the source, to another localized point, which will be the destination. So now, then, for it to be transmitted instantly, in this context, I will say that if we could have genuine contact at both sides, then we can say we are able to have that instant transmission. If we could have genuine contact at complex level, and then have genuine contact at classical level, then we have instant transmission. If the signal is being exhibited as if there is no space in between the distance. You understand? So basically, if you think about what I just said now, you can see the reason it is ideal for us to actually dissect quantum entanglement in this manner, for us to really understand this concept. Another thing I want to quickly talk about is to talk about the solution, the ultimate solution of formula of everything, which is formula of everything. By applying it, it allows for the cohorting of observation and experience. So observation and experience in the universe, we have this phenomenon of observation, which is having a suspension, and then we have another phenomenon of experience, which is having genuine contact. So by applying formula of everything, we're able to see these two phenomena, and then we're able to get the solution of having both observation and experience cohorting in a newly discovered field known as static and undulating field. I know it might be so weird, and I know many people might not want to even agree with this, but then apart from talking about observation and experience cohorting together, don't forget that observation and experience, they are the two means by which we can get to measure reality of the universe. It's either we get the reality of the universe by observation. So when you are at a certain interval to what you are objecting, what you are observing, you tend to get the totality of that object. For instance, if one should move away to a certain distance in space and you observe the earth, you'll be able to get the totality of the earth, and from that you can get to know that earth is spherical. Unlike, uh, the initial perspective while being on earth, while in contact with earth, we might just believe that the earth is flat. So now, then the experience is to have genuine contact. By having genuine contact, we can get to know, you know, the reality of the objects on the earth. But when we move away from the earth to a certain distance, we will get the reality of the earth, but we'll be deluded of the reality of the people on the earth. So now, those are the two facts. So basically, what I'm saying invariably is that we have this cohorting of observation and experience, and also we have this cohorting of localization and globalization. So we have that phenomenon of quantum mechanics, which is globalization, and the phenomenon of classical mechanics, which is localization, together right inside the static and undulating field. And I will explain deeply further as we go into this particular video. So now, I want you to look at this chart. We have y equal to e to the x. And so we have the curvature to be the blue curvature, which is inversely related to the red curvature. And the red curvature is y equal to log x base e. So now, from this, we can get to see that log is an inverse of exponential. But then, there is something I want us to explore for us to get what logarithm is all about. So now at the center, we have y equal to x, which is the diagonal line that we have right there. But can we now really say that the the log curvature is the same thing as the exponential curvature? Can we really say that they are the same thing? You understand? So for us to have idea of what I want to shed light on, I want us to look at what we have below here. Now, the sensation of taste is logarithmic. The sensation of taste is logarithmic instead of being linear. So, what do I mean by this? If we were to compare 50 and 100 grams of dissolved salt, after some sips of the two, we are going to perceive the taste of the 100 grams as being much more than twice as salty as that of the 50 grams. Even though it is expected that 100 grams should be twice as salty as 50 gram, it should be multiple of the 50 gram in terms of taste. But that is not what we truly experience. And there is where we have this qualitative arrangement of information. There are types of arrangement of information. We have quantitative arrangement of information, and there is qualitative arrangement of information. Now, the qualitative arrangement of information, it refers to the kind of experience that we have. So at deeper level, we'll be relating to consciousness, and when we now have precise arrangement of information, we can get to instantiate or to manifest the exact object of that information like that. For instance, let's say we have a book of recipe that we can actually read to produce a cake. So if we follow that book thoroughly to the extent that we're able to get precise measurements of all those ingredients as laid down in, we will produce the exact cake. So if we can have precise measurements of those ingredients and apply them and do the same environment, the same temperature, if we can work at precise level of applying the ingredients and all that, we will produce the exact cake. So information is not different from the object. An object is not even different from information. So we can derive information from object and also derive object from information. So I just want us to have that at the back of our minds, as that will help us as we progress with this. So now I want us to look at, let's say we have 3 to the power of 2, 3 raised to power 2. And so 3 times 3 will give us 9. So we can write that in logarithm form, which will be log 9 base 3 equal to 2. Now, we are to now take this exponential to its inverse. So basically, we know that writing it in logarithm will give us the inverse of that exponential. But then it is more or less like using logarithm to undo the exponential. It will just write it in the form as we have it. But then we can still have the inverse of the exponential by having 2 raised to power 3, which will give us 2 times 2 times 2, which will be 8. And so in the logarithm form, we have it to be log 8 base 2 equal to 3. So now by relativity, we can get to see that the initial result of the exponential, which is 9, is being decayed to 8 when relativity is considered. So now the inversely related part is not the same thing as the initial exponential. So now that is the information that we get. Now, how can we do it such that we retain the 9 for the inverted part, which is the inverse exponential. How can we do it? So what we're now trying to do here is actually synonymous to what we have right here. Don't forget that the non-trivial zeros of Riemann hypothesis, we have it to be vertically lined up, or we have it to be vertically orientated. Okay, so now the essence of having it to be vertically lined up is for the fact that it emulates, or it symbolizes, gravity. So for classical, it stands for free fall of the classical gravity. And then for the quantum gravity, by applying formula of everything, we know what the quantum gravity is already, which is constantly accelerating momentum. So the acceleration that we have must be constant, and we know that we actually allow for influx of variations, that we allow for angular momentum, because we are at most curved region. So you get to see that by the time I get to time energy wave model. So now back to this. If we can actually move from the initial exponential down to the inverted exponential, such that we retain the 9, it will actually give us this vertical lineup of the zeros, because the effect of relativity will not be implemented on that momentum. Like I said the other time, when you have relativity involved in a system, now the two party will move towards the central point of the relativity at equal speed, or repel away from the central point of relativity at equal speed. And as a result of that, there will be no possibility for us to get object at the point of its instantiation. That is the problem of not having global now, and that is the problem of relativity, which allows us to have suspension at one side and have to have genuine contact at one side and then have suspension at the other side. So we want to tackle that for you to get to see how formula of everything has solved the mystery of Riemann hypothesis. So now the inverted exponential, we have it to be 2 raised to power 3 equal to 2 times 2 times 2 will give us 8. But when we're now writing it in logarithm form, we have the liberty of writing it as log 9 base 2 equal to 3.1699. Approximately, we have it to be 3.2. So basically, we know that this logarithm has become a transcendental logarithm. So by trying to retain 9, then that has made it to go beyond the limit of 3. It has made it to go beyond the limit of 3. So it is transcendental. Now, this transcendental phenomenon is highly essential for us to actually get to the complex level, because we are trying to move from the substrate dimension to higher dimension, and that will now be the complex system. So now, with the complex system, we then get to know that basically the zeta function, you know that when it becomes an analytic continuation, such that we integrate complex number into the series, then we know that we can then have the non-trivial zeros of the Riemann hypothesis. So now, from this, we can get to know that the virtue of scaling the space to the maximum level can actually give us the system of can actually give us that complex system. So it is not until when we have imaginary number combined with real number that we have complex system. So now let's look at prime counting function. We have it to be pi n in parentheses. Now the pile is not the normal pile of a circle. It is just a notation for the counting of prime numbers. So now by using this prime counting function, then we get these jagged patterns. The jagged patterns, as you can see, when we get to a particular prime number, we have it being shoot up from the low energy state to high energy state. So we have it when it reaches 2, we have it when it reaches 3, and so we have it to be in this jagged pattern progressively. Now, before we could have this, of course, we should have an inverse of this, which would serve as energy support for this progression as we have it, for this expansion, for this jump. So as we get to, by the time we get to time energy wave model, then you will get to know why time energy wave model is so ideal and why formula of everything is the ideal solution for the Riemann hypothesis. So now we have 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. We have them to be prime numbers. Then when you look at the distribution of prime numbers, you can see that prime number is somehow random. It is not ordered. It is not that we have 2, 3 as we have it and have it continuously. We have 2, 3 being close to each other, and yet we have 4. We have gap of the 4 in between, and then the next one we have gap of 6 in between. But then if you now consider 7 to 11, we have gap of 8, 9, 10 in between. So it is random. It is not orderly. Okay, so now we want to look at how prime numbers are being distributed and then get to see what non-trivial zeros of Riemann hypothesis is all about. We know that by applying the Riemann hypothesis to get the non-trivial zeros, I'm talking about the vertical lined up of zeros on critical strips. Those ones that we have, they are the major ones, but don't forget that yet we still have trivial zeros for even numbers, and so we're going to treat that too in this part too. So now that we have this, but now when we now look at this second chart here, when you consider the vastness of time, when you consider long period of time, then you realize that the jagged function that you have up here then gets smoothed out. So we have it to be diagonal, just as what we have right here. Then having it to be diagonal as what we have, we can actually liken that to couples of zeros, and you can see I put zeros on that. You will get to see why it is necessary to liken this to 0, because initially we have rough chart, and yet by considering the long run of time or the long period of time, we have it being smoothed out. So we can actually consider the fact that it's more or less like we have this kind of balance for us to have such smooth diagonal line. So now I put zeros for all of them. And now when it reaches the topmost, then don't forget that all the zeros, they have potential energy. And then it means that they can actually do work. So now right from there, we then have this free fall, which is synonymous to classical gravity. classical gravity. Now, it is said to be free fall because mass worth has no effect in classical gravity. So, irrespective of the size of the object's mass relative to the other, when you are in that gravity field without any other influence of here or any other thing, then both objects, irrespective of their mass, will actually reach the floor or the bottom at the same time. So now you can consider that to be a vertically arranged zeros. So you can consider that to be vertically arranged zero. So now we have the real zeros, which are the blue zeros. Now the blue zeros, they are the real zeros, and as you can see, I want you to look at this region. As you can see, they actually go beyond the limit of the real axis. So it is necessary to have it like this because we must actually move to the higher dimension to connect to the system of the higher dimension. Now, then you can see that we have some other zeros which are red zeros. Those are the ones that I call non-trivial zeros. They are the one on the critical strip at 0.5 point on the real axis. So now, by applying formula of everything, what I have realized or discovered rather is that when you put the mass worth of electron right inside the formula of everything, you can use that to get the classical counterpart, which will be 2,277,250,000 kilogram. When you now put that classical value, don't forget formula of everything is a formula that fits back on itself. You can actually use an input to generate an output, then use the generated output as input to generate further output. That's what it's all about. So now, we need to do it like this if we want to actually track the phenomenon in the black hole. So now, we have these real zeros being at event horizon, and then that is the first part where you use the mass of electron to get the classical counterpart. Now we have the trajectory to be vertical, and that means that it is static, but having the elongation of these zeros being lined up as they are lined up, it means that we have a kind of momentum right inside the system. But then that is why I call the field static and undulating field. So we must have the elongation of that zeros in order for it to bridge the gap between the classical mechanics and quantum mechanics. You will get to see the full picture when we get to time energy wave model. So now, from what I have just shown you now, you can see that the time period is very essential, and then energy gap from classical level through quantum level to complex level is also ideal, also essential, because the energy gap will allow the quantum entanglement to get connected to what it should get connected to. So it will not be drifted by noise. And that is the essence of the energy gap. So now, by the time you now use the classical mass worth in the formula of everything to reconfirm the mass of electron, the one you used initially, you will discover that the value will have been decayed by negating 1 from the power. You can now see that the negation, the decaying will be at the power level for the quantum mass, but then the decaying will be on the base value. Of course, the classical mass worth has no power to it, so the decay will be on that. The effect of that decay will be on the base value. So now we have that, and that is an indication that the trajectory, the initial trajectory, is being shifted forward into the black hole, not at event horizon again. And so it has been decayed down from 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 31 kilogram to 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32 kilogram. Okay, so now let us quickly see how formula of everything is applied before we go to time energy wave model. Application of formula of everything. Now this is formula of everything. dt dm equal to capital Um plus 4m. Now the reason we have dt dm to this is that we have curvature of time to energy. Then right inside that we have the linear solution, which is in form of capital Um plus 4m. So linear solution is nested right inside the curvature of time to energy. Then you will see the essence of that curvature as we move to the time energy wave model. So now let's continue. Now, if we now want to use the mass worth of electron, just like I said earlier, now under the first phase results, the constant value of this capital U is this particular value, 2.5 times 10 raised to power 39. So if we put the value of electron right inside the parentheses, plus 4, don't forget we have 4m right here, and then put the value of electron again for that m, our result will be 2,277,250,000 kilograms, like I said earlier. And that is the classical mass of the electron. That is the classical mass, the counterpart of the electron. So now, we now have to move from classical level to quantum level. So we're going to use the classical result right inside the formula of everything. By the time we do that, we're going to have our result to be 5.7 times 10 raised to power 48. Now, the moment we'll expand this in standard form, then you can see the zeros. Now the zeros as we have it there is synonymous to these diagonal zeros. So you can only stretch something in the universe by having it being stretched by zeros. So we have these zeros stretching, scaling the system for us. And so we now have the suspension of the base value of electron at 30 seconds. You can see that we have it at 30 seconds. Now, how can we have these vertical zeros? Basically, what we have here, we already have potential energy, which we actually allow for free fall, because the potential energy must do work. So now the free fall will be spontaneous, but in our case we can manually annihilate the suspended zeros, only the suspended zeros, and that will give us that vertical trajectory of zeros. To now do that, we'll put the value. Don't forget that the value is in form of like 9,109, showing that it's at classical level. So now to cross from the classical level to quantum level, then we now say 9,109 over 10 raised to power 32. By the time we'll expand that fraction the way we have it here, then we're going to have our answer to be 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32 kilograms, like I said earlier. So now this result, as we have it, we can as well just put it right inside the formula of everything, and so we're going to call this second phase result. So when we put that, so now this time we're like trying to track, the decaying effect from quantum level to classical level. Now we know that as we move from the classical level, we are not able to confirm the initial electron that we used. So we are able to get a decayed value of that. So what that is telling us is that it is so difficult for us to capture that quantum entanglement that connects from substrate dimension to higher dimension. It is so difficult because it is instant. And then having that trajectory to be vertical, it simply means that we can only apply that trajectory relative to the classical one time. So we have used the value of electron to get to the classical mass worth. Now using the classical mass worth to get back to the quantum level is, applying that trajectory second time, and that has shifted into the black hole. So it is no more maintaining the event horizon region. It is being shifted into black hole. And so we have seen the effect of the black hole on that by having that decayed worth, or having it to be decayed as we have it. So now, we now put the decayed value right inside the formula of everything. Now look at what we have. The answer that we have is now 277,725,000 kilograms. Even though we have some zeros at the back of the dot, the zero at this region, we have a kind of suspension that is being sustained by these couples of zeros that we have at the back of the dot. But the zero is insignificant. We can get rid of that to explore further. So with this decayed worth, we know that almost about 2 billion worth of the classical mass worth is being decayed. So now that is how we can track right inside the black hole using the formula of everything. So now we can then put that value right inside the formula of everything, just as we have below. And then it will give us 6.9 times 10 raised to power 47. If we now expand that in standard form, now look at what happens. Now the power has moved. It has moved from forward. It has moved from forward back. So initially we have it from 31st to 32nd, and now we have it from 32nd to 31st. So the power is now intact, but then the base value of the electron is then being decayed to 11109. So that is the limit. The moment we have the base value of the electron being decayed, as opposed to it being decayed at power level, that is the limit. So now, by the time we manually annihilate, then we put the value 11109 over 10 raised to power 31 equal to, we have it to be 1.1109 times 1 raised to power 10 minus 31. Of course, it will now give us 1.1109 times 10 raised to power minus 31 kilogram. Now, the moment we have this, we know that we have reached the suspension right inside the black hole, which is, the neutron star suspension. So now you can see the effect from the power, where we have the power from moving forth and back, and then the base value moving forth and back. That phenomenon is similar to quasar signal. What we have discovered now is similar to quasar signal. So right inside the black hole, we have the quasar signal phenomenon. Okay, so now let's now go further. So now here you can see that here we have, this zeta function being defined. This is the zeta function. And then we know that when you set the s value of the zeta function to be 1, we have it results to be infinity, which is synonymous to having genuine contact at one side, then having suspension at the other side. So now, when you set the value to be more than 1, for instance, let's say we have 2, then we'll be able to have convergence towards pi square over 6. So you can see we have the fraction to be 1 over 1 squared plus 1 over 2 squared, and so it continues like that till infinity. So now, what we now need to know is that by the time we integrate complex system into the series, then we have what is known as analytic continuation. So now the system now become the complex valued function. And so the vertically lined up non-trivial zeros on critical strip, they are encoded primes of half instantiated pointer to the O. Now, when you apply formula of everything, you'll be able to get that the non-trivial zeros, they are the prime encoded zeros or prime encoded worth. Because when you use the harmonic oscillation of that Riemann hypothesis, when you implement that, it will conform to the prime counting function. It will conform to that jagged pattern. By the time you get, for instance, let's say you generate 10,000 trillion, you generate 10 trillion non-trivial zeros. So by the time you get harmonic oscillation of those zeros, and you implement all the harmonic oscillations of all the 10 trillion zeros, it will conform to the jagged pattern of prime. So with that, we get to know. So now when you look at this region, you can see that at 0.5 or 1/2 region, we have the non-trivial zeros being lined up vertically as we have it. The dashed region, that is the critical strip. So now you can see this, we have imaginary number to be the vertical line, then we have the real axis to be the horizontal line. So for all the negative even numbers, we have trivial zeros for them. So we'll explain what this is all about too as we progress. So now let's see how. Okay, so now the non-trivial zeros on critical strip have harmonic oscillations that conform with the prime jagged counting function patterns of Gauss. Okay, so that is that. So now let's get to this powerful diagram. By the time you apply formula of everything, which is this dt dm equal to capital Um plus 4m, the application will give us this vertical trajectory. Just because I'm trying to use this time energy wave model to model the solution of Riemann hypothesis. So that's why I have, imaginary number as I have it like this, and then I have the real axis. So now, but by the time you apply formula of everything, don't forget we're going to have the base value of electron being suspended at 30 seconds. So we have that to be this diagonal trajectory. Now, this diagonal trajectory, you can see that we have it to be in form of equilateral triangle. Anytime you have an action in time, you must have reaction of that in energy. So this diagonal trajectory, as we have it in time, we must have reaction of that in energy, and that is why we could have this inversely related diagonal trajectory. So don't forget, this curvature, the blue curvature represents the time curvature, while the red curvature represents energy curvature. So now, if we should go back to this, these trivial zeros as we have even is actually pointing to the fact that the moment that trajectory, the inversely related trajectory to time, which is the trajectory of energy, the moment the trajectory momentum gets to the even number to transit to higher dimension, it gets truncated. Because when you look at this time energy wave model, when you look at this time energy wave model, what do you see? The diagonal trajectory of energy represents the constant, it represents the constant momentum of light. Now, the photon of light has no mass, and now you can see that right inside the region, equilateral region, there is nothing like mass there. If you look at the top region where we have this blue, small blue convergence, that is the real classical mass worth. We have the real classical mass worth right inside the system at classical region. But at quantum region, don't forget that this horizontal line down to the energy curvature is the quantum region, while this horizontal line up to this time curvature is the classical region. So now we have mass accumulation, mass instantiation in the classical region, but there is nothing of such in quantum region. And so now we could see that right at the edge of equilateral triangle, we have quantum arbitrary suspension. And then right at the extreme end of the classical equilateral triangle, we have classical arbitrary suspension. So now, the mass worth of quantum realm will be instantiated right inside this equilateral triangle that is being compacted. And I call it nucleus. We have compacted equilateral triangle to touch down on the curvature of energy. I call it nucleus. Then right here too, we have equilateral triangle that is being compacted. I call it nucleus as well. So now, in the nucleus, there is where we're supposed to instantly have the instantiation of electron, though electron cannot be in the nucleus for long. But then, we don't have it yet until it is connected to higher dimension. And then, with that, we have quantum entanglement, because there is no way we can get connected to higher dimension without having this vertical trajectory being sustained. And now we know that from here, from where we have the classical arbitrary suspension down to this quantum arbitrary suspension, what we have there is free fall, and that is the classical gravity. We can also call this vertical trajectory at the center, we can call it event horizon. So now, right after the quantum arbitrary suspension, by the virtue of that gap, that is why energy gap from classical level down to quantum level is so essential. You cannot get quantum entanglement to get entangled to what is ideal without having that energy gap. By the virtue of that energy gap, we then have what is known as spontaneous symmetry breaking. Now, the symmetric nature of this equilateral triangle is being broken right here into the nucleus, where we have the compacted equilateral triangle. And there, what we have is different. Now, because it is being compacted, energy must be accelerated. But don't forget that we still have equilateral triangle which is being compacted, and so the constancy of light speed with the constancy of gravity must be maintained towards each other. And so we have the momentum right there to be constantly accelerating momentum, and that is the quantum gravity for you. The constant accelerating momentum will sustain the resistance to that free fall, even though the resistance is so tiny, so at classical level we cannot see the effect of that resistance. And so the gap of the contraction, the energy of contraction is more than the resistance, and so we have it towards the most curved region of the energy. And by having that phenomenon, we're going to have standing wave, which will be projected into the higher dimension. And once we have it connected to higher dimension, the electron of the higher dimension will be instantly converted to positron in order for the electron of the substrate dimension to be instantiated. And what we now have there is known as quantum entanglement. Now, this quantum entanglement, it shows that we have genuine contact right there because we could get connected to the electron. We could connect to electron, and so we have quantum entanglement, and that is the genuine contact. But at the point where we have the wave collapse to have this entanglement, we then realize that the classical mass worth is being suspended to the point of time energy intersection. But then, this, if we're to have genuine contact at both sides, this classical mass worth will have to be at the point of that time energy intersection. But that is not what we have. So that is telling us that we have genuine contact right at the complex level, and yet we have suspension at classical level. And that is the feasibility of relativity, the problem of relativity of simultaneity. So it is not feasible for us to have genuine contact at both sides. That is the major problem. But then this problem is being solved by quantum entanglement, because quantum entanglement can transmit information instantly. Now, at information level, the problem of not having global now is being solved, and that is why we could have cohorting of localization and globalization right inside the static and undulating field. So now, the moment we have this quantum entanglement, information is being transmitted instantly, and by the virtue of information that is transmitted instantly, we can have genuine contact from positron to electron. So now this higher dimension will be fused into the substrate dimension to generate a unified identity. Then this substrate dimension, which is 2D, with the higher dimension now becomes 3D, even though we still have the 2D being embedded right inside the system. But then the feedback of that instant transmission of information to this classical mass worth, that is the genuine contact that we have at information level, and that is known as objective conscious experience, because it is then that this mass worth can then be conscious of itself, be conscious of its position, and I call it self-awareness. So now, there is other phase of consciousness, which is subjective conscious experience. We are going to have that the moment we have energy being energized at this low energy state, such that we have momentum into the black hole, into the singularity of the black hole. Then as we move towards the singularity of the black hole, then the classical mass worth will be readjusted, will be relocated to the point of time energy intersection. It is then that we can now say that we have subjective conscious experience. Don't forget that momentum is mixed with noise. So the noise will be filtered towards the singularity of the black hole, while we have the genuine signal that we got from the higher dimension towards this event horizon. So now the reality is at the present phase or at event horizon. And so by the time we have this mass worth being at the point of time energy intersection, right inside the core singularity of the black hole, we have suspension. So you can, that is why it is difficult for us to have relativity of simultaneity. For us to have things happening at the same time by, for us to have things happening at the same time when the vastness of space is considered is difficult. It is only through quantum entanglement that we can have that. And that is just a kind of phenomenon that just happens like almost instantly. So now, with that, you can get to see if I should now use this diagram to explain the Riemann, our formula of everything has solved the Riemann hypothesis, you can get to see that we have this event horizon trajectory, which is the trajectory of the original zeros, and that trajectory goes beyond the limit of the substrate to higher dimension to connect, but that connection is almost instant. So we then have it being shifted forward into the black hole where we have the non-trivial zeros, and you can see the value has become 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32 kilogram. So the real electron's mass worth is being decayed to that value. So we now have it being shifted, and that happens to be the half worth of the real electron because it's on the 0.5 point on real axis. So definitely, if we should get double of these 32 zeros, which will be 64, we can get the pattern. Just as these 32 zeros, when you get the harmonic oscillation of that, you get the jagged pattern of prime. Then prime now serves as arbitrary convergence relative to the real convergence of electron. That is what it means. But the prime itself, it's a real object on its own relative to anything ahead of it. But where it is relative to the electron in the higher dimension through the central 0 point, then it is an arbitrary convergence. Yes, arbitrary. So now, what that is telling us is that non-trivial zeros, they are a half pointer, they are prime-encoded half pointer to the O. So the O we are referring to in this case is the real electron. So now the 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32 is a pointer to the real electron. So basically, how can we now prove that these vertically arranged non-trivial zeros, they are at 0.5 position on real axis, and then how can we prove that they can actually point to the real electron? To prove that, we will then have to apply formula of everything. You know how formula of everything is being applied already. But then let's look at this. To prove that the shift of manual annihilation from 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 31 kilogram to 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32 kilogram is 1/2 or 0.5 on the critical strip, we take the digital root of all the suspended zeros. Why is it that the digital root is all we have to take? The digital root, we need to take the digital root because the reality we want to get is behind the non-trivial zeros. It is not ahead of the non-trivial zero. It's behind the non-trivial zeros. So we have to go back to the root to connect to the reality. So now to do this, suspended zeros, they are 10 raised to power 32, just as we have it right at the classical level. Now the total sum of suspended zeros is 32. all the suspended zeros, they are 32, because we have the base value of electron being suspended at 32nd. We have it being suspended at 32nd as we have it here. So now all we have to do is 32nd. To get the digital root, we just say, because having it to be 32 is not from 1 to, it's not from 1 to 9. So it's not from 1 to 9. So we now say 3 plus 2 will give us 5, and that is a prime. So you can see that all those zeros, they are prime encoded zeros. Now, by the time we now get double of 32, because we know that by the time having it on 0.5 means that it's a half pointer to the reality. So we have double of 32, which will now be 64. If we say 6 plus 4, it will give us 10. So 10 cannot be digital root. So we now say 1 plus 0 will give us 1. But then we can get to see distribution of prime from 1 to 10. So if we dissect from 1 to 10, we see that the 5, which is being decoded to as prime for that 32 zeros, we have it at the center. So now the 1 can actually be the same thing as the totality of electron, which is 1. But you can see this 10 is even. The 10 is even. It is transcendental. So now at that even, we have it being truncated because it will not allow for mass worth, and that is more or less like the way we have convergence for all the even numbers at negative side of the real axis. So that is how it is being proved that Riemann hypothesis is being solved. This is a new solution to it. So if you want to know more about my research publication, I will put link to my research publication in the description section of this particular video. Go and get my research publication and explore it more. Thank you. So I'll call it a day. God bless you.